Hello and welcome to our final session of the IPA World seminar on play at times of crisis. And we have been showcasing over the last 6 weeks 23 projects from across the world, and 11 countries have been featured in those webinars. And we have, I'm sure everyone has experienced the real feeling of being a sense of togetherness and belonging as we heard how different organisations and individuals had adjusted their mission to preserve, protect and promote children's right to play during this particularly difficult time in our history. And in fact, we've seen so many people be so innovative and creative in their delivery. And tonight, in our final session, we actually are finishing with the government and the NGOs' responses to supporting play during these COVID times. And we're welcoming tonight Auckland in New Zealand, who it's 11 o'clock at night there, and we're welcoming them currently in lockdown. To a warm welcome to Jacqueline and Glenn from Auckland Council. We're welcoming the team from Let's Play Island with the Department of Children and Youth Affairs. So we're seeing tonight and hearing about, you know, a government approach, a national government approach. And we also have Play Wales with us as one of the peak non-government organisations and seeing what their approach is. So we've got a cross section. And we're going to be finishing with IPA Portugal, who is going to be sharing with us some of the work they've been doing and inviting us to partake in one of their new initiatives. So it's going to be a busy night and hopefully just as inspiring as all the others. I'm sure it will be. And I want to actually say thank you to everybody for coming online and joining us over these 6-week series. It's been really, I say, a wonderful way to connect and meet people, and I hope you're feeling as inspired as I have been by all of the different people we've managed to interact with. And I'm feeling a little sad as well tonight, knowing that this is, the session 6. And next Wednesday we won't be doing this, but I'm sure we now have momentum to do these again and again in different formats, not just as part of IPA World, but certainly in your own organisations. And at the moment we've got lots of different free webinars we're hearing about, and we'll continue to share them on the IPA World Facebook page so that people can connect. We usually check first with you if you are doing a free webinar, if you want the world to know about it, because obviously we're not going to promote something if you think you prefer it just to be country based. But always let us know if there's something that we can do to help you, promote what your organisation's doing or a project that you're running. Okay, so as we get started tonight, our first presentation is going to be, we're letting New Zealand go first because, we don't want anyone to fall asleep from New Zealand. So I'm going to hand over to Jacqueline and Glenn. And you will note that last time we had presenters from New Zealand, we had 2 in a room together. And of course, tonight, they're not in a room together. So, I'm going to hand over to you, Jacqueline. We'll just say ta-da to everybody else. I think IPA playwrights, is that possible?
Right, I shall share my screen. It would also be a bit weird for Glenn and me to be in the same room at 11 o'clock at night.
I was about to say.
Our families might say, what's going on here and why is this necessary? Okay, And
I just remind everybody if they could mute.
Can everybody see my screen?
Somebody else, just in case.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay.
Larry, that's all very happy. Your birthday.
Just a reminder to actually turn your microphones off, please, everybody.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Jacqueline Collins, tōku ingoa. Hello, everybody. My name's Jacqueline Collins, and I'm presenting tonight on behalf of the Auckland Council with my colleague, Glenn Brown, who is on the call, has asked me to do the presentation, but is available to speak up. Do you want to say hello, Glenn?
Kia ora koutou te whānau, ko Glenn Brown, taka wingoa. Good evening, good morning, and good day from down under.
Absolutely. So I'll take us through this presentation, and we have some time for questions at the end. So if anybody has questions specifically about Glenn's portion of the program, which will become apparent as we go through the slides, he is on hand to address them. Or Glenn, if I say something which is terribly inaccurate, please just pipe up and tell me. So Glenn and I are both part of the Parks, Sport and Recreation Department at Auckland Council, which is a pretty broad department, which includes everything from park-based activations, which is the part of the team that I sit in, to regional parks, to local parks, to designing playgrounds, to looking after nature play. It's a really big department with a really broad remit. So in New Zealand last year, we had a lockdown which lasted from the 25th of March to the 13th of May, and it was a pretty quick call into lockdown. The first stage of it, which was our level 4 lockdown, started on the 25th of March and went till the 27th of April. We had 2 days notice that we were going into lockdown, and it was a full, very serious lockdown. We weren't allowed to leave our houses, essentially. Everything was shut, schools were shut, all business places were shut for everything except the most essential workers. And it was a really nerve-wracking time for Kiwis. You know, we knew that COVID was on the horizon. We knew that there was a high chance that it would eventually become present in our communities. But our government took really swift and decisive action to say we are not going to go down the route of allowing this to become, we're not going to let it get a hold in our communities. Basically, we're going to keep everybody at home and try and break the cycle of infection. So we had our level 4 lockdown, which was our most serious and restrictive lockdown for about 5 weeks, and then that was followed by about another 5 or 6 weeks, probably 5 weeks at level 3, which is slightly less restrictive, but still everybody's staying at home and everything's shut. So it was a really challenging time for Kiwi whānau. It was just a big shock, and suddenly we were all at home. We were all trying to navigate this new reality. I know everybody's gone through the same thing. It's not news to any of us how hard it has been to adjust to lockdown. But with regard to the work that our department does, it really affected what people could access and what people could do, because everything was shut, essentially. We were allowed to go out for local recreation, so a walk, but all the parks and playgrounds were shut. We weren't expected to do any kind of congregating. We had to stay in our bubbles, which was the people that live with us in our household. We had to socially distance. And of course, we all had to adjust to homeschooling and working from home. And I'm sure that Auckland Council isn't unusual in that that was quite a teething process, getting the hang of working from home and just our technology enabling us to do that effectively. So it was a really challenging time, and it was also a time of real concern because we didn't know how widespread COVID would be. We didn't know if the measures that were being taken would work. And there was also, you know, a lot of concern about what the impact would be for our economy, for, you know, our society. It was a challenging time. So within Parks, Sport and Rec, we came up with a couple of responses to try and support our communities through the lockdown. And those are the 2 responses that we're going to talk about tonight. So one is the program called Backyard Wild Child, which was Glenn's project, which was a video content and virtual event program, which basically took online a program which Glenn delivers called Wild Child, which is pretty much a nature play program, which is encouraging and promoting nature play and nature experiences. It was a lot of video content and virtual events, and it was shared on Facebook. The other delivery that we made was an online game called, that we got the Cnz Lockdown Challenge, which was what my team took forward. I have a very innovative and forward-thinking manager, Peter Kachopoli, who's on this call, so I have to say nice things about him. And he had bought us a license to a software called Goose Chase, which enables what's essentially an online scavenger hunt. You load up challenges which are called missions, and then people download the free app to their phone and they can complete the missions. And it kind of is like a fun, friendly competition. So we'd had this license, and Pete had been looking for an opportunity to use it. So when the lockdown got announced with 2 days notice, he and I had a call, and he said, hey, I think this could be an opportunity to try Goose Chase. Can we see if we can find a way of encouraging people to still be playful and active at home? So we basically jumped into action and spent the next 2 days before the lockdown actually started trying to design some content so we could launch it as the lockdown began. So we delivered it via Goose Chase and we promoted it on Facebook. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, hang on. What's happening? Technology. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Backyard Wild Child, as I said, it was really focused on local and backyard nature plays. So what Glenn did was take the nature play that was going to be delivered in a group setting in parks and kind of brought it more to a kind of an individual and whānau level. The video content, basically Glenn became a character, quite a famous character, Ranger Glenn and the Ranger Bear, who became very well known on Facebook. Their work was really well promoted by other sites and other people who had an interest in nature play in particular, and even expanded to include junior ranger videos, which starred some of the park rangers' children. And it just really enabled sharing opportunities to engage still in nature play, but also really reinforcing key lockdown messages. And because Ranger Glenn was a figure that the community kind of loved and trusted, people listened to his messages, which was really important. And it was a really successful project that Glenn ran as well. One of the things with it was the Great Easter Camp-In, which replaced a planned camping event in a park. And it was hugely successful. The post advertising it reached 34,000 people. It was basically encouraging people to camp at home, whether that was in their garden or whether that was in their living room in a blanket fort. It was something which was hugely popular. Loads of people engaged with it. And Glenn and his team produced 25 videos, reached about over 5,000 people, and had engagement with over 24,000 Facebook users. So it was a project with a lot of reach and really showed that even just Facebook can be a really effective way of promoting messages and reaching users, especially when everybody is at home and really looking for help to entertain their kids. Our project that we got, the Cnz Lockdown Challenge, had a similar kind of philosophy. So our goal was to produce content which would be delivered on a weekly basis, on a daily basis rather. So there's daily missions, and our goal was to try and promote the idea of whole family play and really socialise an idea that we're trying to move forward on, which is essentially Auckland is my playground. So we're trying to shift away from an asset-based approach to play into more of a systems-based approach to play, and kind of reinforcing to people that you don't need to go to a playground for your children to play. So what we did was design a series of missions which really encouraged families to look at their homes and look at their immediate local areas and their gardens and find ways to be playful. So it was really just a big collection of suggestions and ideas which we presented in a very non-council-y style. It was a bit of an advantage that we were in lockdown, so we could kind of go rogue a little bit with our communication. We didn't have to clear everything by a comms team, so we took advantage of that. We made sure that with our game, we also really complied with lockdown restrictions and used game missions as a way of reinforcing important guidance about kind of hand washing and stay at home and those kind of things. And we also used our game to really promote some charities and some other activities that were going on at the time. So for example, in late April, we have Anzac Day. We celebrate Anzac Day, which is kind of our version of Remembrance Sunday. So that was a real opportunity. We designed missions and content that encouraged people to reflect on Anzac Day, to create art to put in their windows, for example, to reflect celebrating Anzac Day, because what we would usually do, which is going to dawn services, obviously couldn't happen during a lockdown. So we, so this is the app that we used, Goose Chase. It's, I think, if memory serves me right, a Canadian app. And it is an incredibly user-friendly app, and it's definitely something, if people haven't experienced it, it's worth investigating if you're looking for innovative ways to deliver content to the general public. It's very user-friendly, and this is an example of the kind of missions that we would write. We just tried to make it really positive, really friendly, pretty straightforward language. And one thing we really tried to do with our missions as well was to really be very mindful of the fact that the lockdown was a very sudden call for New Zealanders. So when it came to things like encouraging play, we didn't want to make assumptions that people would have Lego, for example. We weren't going to say build a Lego tower, because Lego is really expensive and heaps of kids don't have Lego. So it was more just build a tower with anything you have in the house. We were also really mindful of the fact that parents were really stressed and really busy. And I've got 2 children, so I could speak from experience on that front. We didn't want to add to parents' kind of emotional workload during what was already a really busy time. So we made sure we didn't include, you know, bake a cake kind of thing. We tried to not add to people's workloads. So we tried to include a lot of stuff which maybe parents could set up, but then kids could get on with, but stuff that wasn't going to be messy necessarily. So no kind of paper mache and none of that kind of thing. We also started including basically chores as play. So, hey kids, why don't you do the washing up? You know, so trying to really encourage the idea that we're all in this together in a household, and that A, things like washing up can be fun and playful, and B, actually you're part of the family, so let's all help each other out. So we got through quite a lot of content in the lockdown period, so the level 4 and the level 3. I wrote 200 missions in the end, so I was uploading 3 or 4 missions a day. It was actually probably my one and only experience of being almost like a cult leader, where I would suggest to do things at 8 o'clock in the morning and the content would go live, and then I would start seeing the news feed of the game of people doing what I'd said. So that was pretty awesome. I'm not sure I could make it as a cult leader long term, but it was pretty fun for a while to see the impact of my suggestions. We had a decent number. We had over 1,000 teams registered for the game and play a couple of missions, and we had about 580 teams that were active. Most of them were in Auckland, but we were mindful of the fact that we can't control how people will access stuff online, and so we really just embraced that. And we were also mindful of the fact that we have resourcing within Auckland Council that smaller councils probably don't have, so we really welcomed anybody in New Zealand to engage. And in the end, our teams completed over 10,000 missions, so there was a lot of playing going on. There's a couple of kind of themes of the content that Glenn and I produced, and one of them was a real focus on wellbeing. So we really tried to emphasize these wellbeing messages, the importance of connecting, giving, taking notice, continuing to learn and being active. So obviously for my team in particular, the activation team, being active was a particular focus, but we really did try and include a lot of content that talked about, you know, doing things for others, like writing nice messages outside your neighbour's house on the footpath with chalk, for example, getting in contact with people, you know, waving to the neighbours across the fence, and a lot of learning stuff as well. So we saw it as an opportunity to direct people to useful content on places like YouTube and other opportunities to kind of watch a video and learn how to do something. Again, just trying to socialise the idea that there's lots of different forms that play can take. We also focused on Māori values quite strongly. This is a really important part of our work, our mahi, and within our team in particular, we're very clear that this is a high priority for us. So it was fundamental in both initiatives. Glenn takes this side of things very seriously as well, and we really promote te ao Māori, kind of the Māori way of doing things, as much as we can in our work. One of the really obvious ways that we did that was by using a lot of te reo Māori in our content. So I mean, as Glenn and I have kind of demonstrated, that's becoming the norm in New Zealand. Hasn't always been that way, but it certainly is becoming the norm. And we really embrace that. So again, we were able to use the kind of content we were producing to socialise ideas with a pretty broad audience, all of whom may not necessarily engage with Māori on a daily basis. So for Glenn, that included putting a real emphasis on caring for and protecting Papatūānuku, which is Mother Earth, and really emphasising the value of kaitiakitanga, which is kind of a sense of environmental stewardship and being responsible for the earth and for the environment. For our lockdown, we got this game. We had a lot of Māori play missions. So some of those would be linking to YouTube. This is how you make poi, for example, which is the balls that are on string that you spin. A lot of te reo themed missions. So for example, this is one where you find kind of a Māori proverb. We said to people, find your favourite Māori proverb and illustrate it. And just as I say, a lot of use of te reo, because we thought, why would we miss this opportunity to socialise these important things? We got really good feedback from all of our participants, and the forms that we used really enabled feedback to be given quite easily. So for Glenn's project for Wild Child, Backyard Wild Child on Facebook, obviously that provided good opportunities for people to write comments. And this one was just adorable, somebody asking for their son to have a birthday message, and Glenn and Ranger Bear responding with a personalised message, which, can you imagine a 5-year-old, how exciting that would be? So that was very cool. That seems to me like kind of an archetypal Kiwi thing to do. Glenn got some great feedback, and there was really high recognition that he was helping people to connect with Papatūānuku and learn more about their environment, even while they were largely stuck at home. And the Easter campaign was hugely popular. What we did as well is a bit of cross-pollination. So we wrote a mission about the Easter campaign and encouraged people to sign up to it. So we did try and do quite a lot of that as well, with other projects that we knew that were going on, and particularly Backyard Wild Child. For our project, We Got the Cnz project, we got some really good feedback, and it was exactly the kind of thing we would have hoped to have heard, which was people pretty much saying, this just gave us so many good ideas to be active and for the kids to have fun, and really helped to prevent some boredom, which was obviously our goal, was to just try and make it a bit easier for parents and kids to get through the lockdown experience. And it was really cool to see how imaginative people would be. So for example, we had one idea, we linked to some content on the Auckland Zoo website. Auckland Zoo is a council-controlled organisation, so it's part of our wider council whānau. And we linked to some council content and said, some zoo content rather, and said, hey, why don't you make your own zoo? And then we'd get these pictures through, like, this is just hilarious to me. These kids have gone to so much trouble dividing all their animals into categories, fencing them off so, you know, the lions don't eat the zebras, and just so cool. And this comment is so great because it really illustrates how just suggesting one thing sparked off a whole day of activity for this family, which was, you know, exactly the dream outcome. And also just really promoting the idea that just spending time together as a family is really cool. So while there was a lot of negative elements of being in lockdown, there was also this newfound opportunity to be together. I think it's important to acknowledge, and I'm sure this is the same worldwide, the opportunity to see the lockdown as a kind of a beneficial, enriching experience is obviously one that comes from a place of huge privilege. You know, that's something which people who aren't struggling to pay their rent or hungry or in an abusive situation can enjoy. And obviously for a lot of families that's not the case, but it was good to be able to provide something enjoyable for some families to kind of experience. And then we've had a bit of a legacy from our lockdown activities and initiatives. So Ranger Glenn continues to produce wild child content, and at the moment during our current lockdown he's been producing some content. And we've used the Goose Chase game to kind of rehash some of our home-based and local missions and add in new content which involves directing people to playgrounds in their local area now that we're not usually in lockdown, which we've been calling that as Auckland is no playground. And that is something which is proving to be, it's a really promising idea. We've not quite cracked how to promote that effectively, but it's got a lot of potential, and it really shows the potential of Goose Chase as an app and as a delivery tool for play initiatives. And we've also found that we're getting a bit of interest from other teams within council who might be running an event or delivering something and want to add a playful element. So they've asked us for help with Goose Chase content. And I'll pretty much help anybody as long as it's going to encourage kids to be playful and active. That's pretty much my prerequisite. So that's gone pretty well. So that's us. I feel like I forgot to press my timer, but I feel like I've gone in at probably about the right time. But does anybody have any questions that they would like to raise about what we did and how we did it? Or Glenn, do you have anything I've missed?
More like
No, you smashed it.
Thanks.
Certainly, we've got questions at the end, but what I must say, it sounds like Ranger Glenn is going to be like a pretty famous, he might end up more famous than Jacinda Ardern.
It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, let's not go there. And I suppose that's just one thing to add. And the challenges when we come up with this idea, our communications team and the multiple layers that are involved within our organisation, to where we've come from at the beginning, we're a little bit hesitant and wanting to question, and just to make sure everything was on brand. I was a bit of a rebel, a bit like similar to what Jacqueline said. We just went out there because we were there to serve our communities and to connect with our communities. And it's been really interesting to watch that whole turnaround, this going back into this lockdown. I've got our communications team texting me 10 minutes after the decision to say, Glenn, we've got to get content together. And so just that being able to use that character and that sense of connection to put a playful element to some very serious messaging going out. So yeah, it's been really great in that context. And we've really enjoyed it.
I think also what the lockdown really showed us, it's changed the council in a lot of ways, and I'm sure anybody else on the call who works for local government can appreciate this. It certainly it's broadened, I think, a lot of people's horizons within council of how things can be done. It's even changed how we work. So before the lockdown last year, things like working from home were not necessarily widespread, but now I think you'd struggle to find anybody at council who doesn't work from home at least a couple of times a week, even when we're not in lockdown. So the lockdowns were a really challenging experience, but I think that in the long term, they will have been a good thing for us, strangely. And yeah, I think it did help to normalise a little bit that sometimes teams like Glenn and his colleagues and like us, we can actually just crack on with it. Just because we're in this kind of bureaucratic local government environment, it doesn't mean that we have to never have an idea or never do something new and different. Sometimes we can just go for it. And I guess the lockdown enabled us to do that without too much attention being paid to us as we did it, but that was quite a freeing experience, and that's not necessarily the norm sometimes in government.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline and Glenn, for sharing that with us tonight. And we will return after we've heard from the other presenters to having a bit more discussion about that idea around changing the culture as well of, you know, places like local government. I can only imagine that everybody's feeling a lot more playful just being part of that experience. So it's now my opportunity to and pleasure to jump from New Zealand. They can have a little nap. Well, before discussion time, over to Linda O'Sullivan. And Linda is actually, as I mentioned earlier, is joining us from Ireland's Department of Children and Youth Affairs. And she'll be presenting on their campaign, the Let's Play Ireland campaign. So I'll just hand over to Linda. I can't see her as our playwright team.
Thank you very much, Robin. Just checking that you can see my screen.
You can see your screen.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. And our department has actually changed its name recently. So we're now the Department of Children, Disability, Integration, Equality. I've actually forgotten. The name is quite long now, but it's not just Children and Youth Affairs, but we now have Integration, Disability and Equality. So yeah, we are a government department. Play is part of our remit in our team. And a lot of what Jacqueline presented there resonated very much with how we approached the situation we found ourselves in and how we decided to approach it. So I couldn't, sorry, I'm just moving things around my screen so I can see a little bit better there. So the genesis of Let's Play Ireland, very similarly to New Zealand's situation, we found ourselves in COVID, the first lockdown. We're now in our third lockdown this time last year, and very quickly realized the impact this was having on children. As part of our lockdown, playgrounds have been closed. Similarly to New Zealand, we were confined broadly to our homes with a 2-kilometer radius for our homes, which varied, you know, very differently for different families in different environments and situations. And it was brought very quickly to our attention that there was a risk of play deprivation and the impact that that would have on children's development and their mental health and well-being. And there was an even greater concern for children who were at risk, whether through their living conditions or particularly for children with disabilities. So Let's Play Ireland, and similarly to what Jacqueline outlined, we found ourselves having to iterate something much more quickly than we normally would in a government department, and dealing with the situation as quickly as we possibly can. There was a clear need to provide information and resources that would take pressure off parents who were worried about children being out of school, parents who were trying to work from home, where there was a lot of stress in the home. We wanted to put out the idea that it was fine to just let children play, and that, you know, there was huge benefit to just allowing children to play. And similarly to what Jacqueline outlined, even though we should have thought of the messy play thing, we didn't at the time. I learned that myself the hard way. Messy play is a lot of work. But similarly, we tried to see how we could address the issue of play deprivation in ways that would help and support parents and not put them under more pressure. And really supporting children's emotional need for play, and again, with particular awareness around the needs of vulnerable families and children. So our first step was to put together a working group of experts who were able to advise us on how we should address that. So we brought in from our own department people from the parenting unit and the early years unit, and also a member from the Department of Education. We worked with the Child and Family Agency, with social work perspective, with experts from Early Childhood Ireland, and then with local authorities, because they're really crucial to our network, out into local areas, and they would normally have had oversight for playgrounds and play at local level. And then the School of Education in one of our Mary Immaculate College, which is one of our biggest primary teacher educators, and School of Occupational Therapy in University College Cork, where the emphasis was on play, for play's sake, and particularly around children with disability. We also had a broader range of stakeholders, which extended more out into local networks and the NGO sector, particularly around early years education, parenting support, disability, and then the NGO sector in homelessness, migrant support, single parents, child poverty. We also worked with our child and family support networks, which were crucial, again, getting out to families in need, and with other initiatives that were also reaching out to children in ways that were aligned with play, and to access resources that were already existing, as time was of the essence and we didn't really have the time to reinvent the wheel on this. We needed to get resources out there quickly. So we also reached out to Creative Ireland, which had a whole programme of initiatives for children around creativity, National Libraries of Ireland, the Arts Council, and local sports partnerships. So the principles, as outlined earlier, were to relieve stressed parents of pressure, not add more, particularly address the needs of vulnerable children, and to ensure that any resources we reference were inclusive of diverse abilities and needs. And to consider different living environments, particularly children who may have been living in apartments or emergency accommodation, or in direct provision settings or halting sites. So direct provision in Ireland is a temporary living condition for people who are applying for asylum. So the play conditions in those environments wouldn't always be optimum, and same for families who may have been living in homeless, in emergency accommodation hubs, or in halting sites, which again would have had very limited play opportunities. And outdoor environments. So the principle was to support self-directed play, again similarly to what Jacqueline outlined. Also the importance of self-directed play was highlighted to us by experts on the working group, and that children take the lead in their own play and are supported by adults rather than adults taking the lead. We also adhered to the principle of providing play ideas that didn't require any special equipment and that used common household materials available in most homes. And our advice and guidelines were consistently updated according to the evolving levels of COVID restrictions. We also very much work from the principle of not reinventing the wheel and linking to existing resources, because it was so important that we got this up and running and out there and reaching children and families as quickly as possible, as the situation was, the urgency of the situation was apparent to us. So Let's Play Ireland is essentially an online resource, but we did work very closely with our local authorities across the country to reach out into communities. So the first in the early stages website was built. So this is it with our key principles: play is freely chosen, led by the child, and the emotional importance of how play connects us. So there were a number of sections. There was a section for parents that really outlined the importance of play in a crisis, particularly in terms of building resilience and children's coping mechanisms through play, how parents could support their child's play, noisy play, messy play, which retrospectively, Jacqueline, I think your views on that, particularly for working parents, might have been appropriate, but really in terms of just the simplicity of using water, flour, common household items for children to enjoy themselves and for parents to not worry about there being a mess. Playing when you can't go outside. So in the early stages of this, most of our resources and ideas on the website pointed to indoor playing. This evolved as the restrictions eased over the course of the project. And as they changed and went back into lockdown at later stages again, building a focus again on the emotional aspects of play, types of play, and emphasizing the right to play for audiences that might not have been aware of that, and again giving license to parents to not feel under pressure about doing schoolwork with children all the time and about their learning, and to give license to parents to just allow children to play. So the ideas, let's play ideas, again, very simple, from making dens, pretend games, dress up games, inventing board games, planting games, collecting and sorting, everyday items such as bedclothes, furniture, kitchen utensils, stationery, string, clothes pegs, cans, etc. We linked quite a lot to Play Scotland, who had some fantastic resources on messy play, loose parts, experimental play, and we're very grateful to Play Scotland for collaborating with us on that and allowing us to reference their resources. We had a Let's Play Creatively section. This very much linked to creative initiatives across the sector, both government initiatives through Creative Ireland, Crinnew na Nóg, which is in Irish gathering of the young people, but it was a creative festival from Creative Ireland, a government initiative, but then also NGO initiatives and other creative sector initiatives. Imagination was had a whole series of online resources and resources that were delivered to children across the country. Another online book club, the Any Book Club. Some of those initiatives also reached out to grandparents through online means. Share a Story, Bright Sparks Creative Bursts was a library initiative around getting children writing. Novel Teens, the same, focused on teenagers. We wanted to be sure to include means of reaching out to older children as well. Shadow puppets, etc. So a lot of resources that we didn't actually create ourselves, but were able to link to resources that had been created by other organizations in response to the crisis, and all the organizations we reached out to were delighted to share their resources with us. We're very grateful to them, and they were really glad to reach a broader audience that we could reach through government website. Again, as the restrictions, initially our outdoor play resources really focused on what could be done in back gardens. So dens, obstacle courses, fairy garden, bug hotel. I noticed you had something similar, Jacqueline. Picnic, muddy play, those types of resources. But then as restrictions began to ease, we did look at street games that could be played either with family or at appropriate social distance with a couple of neighbouring children as that became allowed. Then Let's Play Families, playful families and families playing together was another key principle of the resources. Family time, board games, card games, just the simple stuff, dance games, indoor ball games, pamper night. Again, playing a little bit with chores, also cookery, meal times. Picnics, whether pretend or real, indoors or outdoors. sensory games, story time, and then we did have a section on screen time, and the idea of that as well was to take some of the pressure off. There was a lot of media highlight on parents worried about their children being on screens all the time. Part of our approach to that was to take some of the worry out of that and focus on positive aspects of screen time, and particularly shared family approach to screen time. So movie night, video games, video call games with grandparents, involving reaching out to grandparents through online video calls and games which could ease also grandparents' loneliness in terms of missing their grandchildren, but where children and grandparents were able to interact. Ireland's Fittest Family was another one. It's a very popular TV show here. So again, just mimicking that in a local environment. And then I suppose what we thought was the end point at that stage, but it looks like we'll be moving towards that again this year, was National Play Day. And National Play Day was an initiative that we had run over a number of years, and would have been an amount of funding that was provided to local authorities to have local play days in their areas. The focus, we tied this last year, 2020, we decided to tie National Play Day in with Let's Play Ireland, because we were still we didn't know what level of lockdown we would be in by July the 4th. And in any case, we knew that the normal types of traditional events that would have been run were not going to be possible. So we collaborated with local authorities to explore what would be best to do for Play Day under lockdown. As it turned out, July the 4th was one of the very early days of an easing of restrictions. But local authorities decided in most cases to use the funding for support play at home and play very close to home, and family play, and in some cases local community play. So the funding was rolled out, and it was quite a small amount of funding to local authorities, but we allowed local authorities the flexibility to identify local needs, and again enhancing and reinforcing the principles behind Let's Play Ireland, with an emphasis on serving seldom heard children and working with existing networks to get play resources to families and communities who most needed them. So the theme of playful families and playful the theme of Play Day was playful families and playful communities. So I'll give you an example of some of the fantastic initiatives that local authorities came up with. So many of the local authorities chose to prioritise children with special needs. For example, in Carlow, sensory play gift bags or play packs were provided to disability support organisations. In Clare, play packs to children with special needs. In Dunleary, Rapdown, play packs again to children with complex developmental needs in collaboration with early intervention teams. Limerick, 200 play packs to children with additional needs, and others distributed play packs to a variety of targeted groups. So others prioritise families who are most likely to suffer from play deprivation. So Cork, for example, chose to focus on direct provision centres. Kildare went through libraries, and also a focused approach on families who were disadvantaged. In other local authorities, they reach children who may have been experiencing play deprivation via family resource centres, intercultural groups, rural traveller groups, targeted housing estates, and quite creative approaches in some instances, such as a social distance disco and movie night in a direct provision centre in Lisdoonvarna in County Clare, and more play packs, again, to targeted communities. So, and then some of the local authorities chose to address play opportunities for all children. So Cavan was one of the few local authorities where they provided play activities in a location at social distance. Others used their libraries network to distribute play packs. Some chose a virtual approach, such as Dublin City Council delivering circus skills virtually. Others, again, used the libraries to distribute resources that could be used by children at home, such as chalk and colouring books. Leitrim also provided an outdoor on-site socially distanced event with balance bike, dance activities, etc. Louth took quite a creative approach to ensuring that children were more active, and they provided 1,000 skipping ropes and online skipping rope tutor. And then other online activities, and Wicklow had a street feast. Again, the local authorities who did choose something location-based, you know, very strongly. At that point, there was some element of outdoor gathering allowed at social distance, so they were very careful to adhere to the restrictions as they were at that point. And then, as I said, we're very grateful to all the organizations that we linked to. We didn't create a huge amount of original resources. Most of the resources that we used were linked to other networks and organizations, and that included the International Play Association, Play Scotland. I know you're all here on this call today, Play Wales, Australian Childhood Foundation, Cork Sports Partnership provided a huge amount of video content as well. We're very grateful to all the organizations who were so generous with their resources and allowed us to access them. So that was our response. It's not a usual type of project that we would find ourselves in turning around so quickly as a government department, but it was one that turned out to have quite a positive impact, and got a lot of attention, and hopefully was very useful. My colleague Olive McGovern is on the call as well, so perhaps when we come to Q&A time, she may have some contributions to that also. So thank you very much. I need to stop sharing. There we go. I think
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Linda. And it's when you think about, it's like a national government we're talking about saying, you know, let's play Ireland. It's probably the dream of everyone in the International Play Association, is to have every country that actually takes that approach. So it's a wonderful thing that you've shared with us tonight, and I'm sure there'll be quite a few questions on how that happened. And certainly the work that you've done in collaborating with other organisations is so important, and that link with some of the really great resources of the National Play Association. But it's also a lovely segue into our next presenters, which is, of course, Play Wales, because you did use some of Play Wales resources in the work that you did. So I'd like to hand over to Marianne. And Marianne is presenting from Play Wales. For those of you not familiar with Play Wales, as she gets set up, Play Wales is the sort of really the peak body, the peak NGO for play in Wales, and has really led the charge in many ways around the implementation of Article 31. Mike from Play Wales, the CEO, is actually a member of the IPA board, a long-term member, and currently treasurer. So it's delightful to have Marianne on board tonight to share with us the work that Play Wales is doing in this space during COVID. So if I hand over to you, Marianne, and I would just say to make sure to play that slideshow from the start, so that we've got the right.
You can see it okay?
We can see it, yes. That's...
Thank you very much. So as Robin said, I'm Marianne from Play Wales. We're the NGO for Play in Wales in the UK. Bore da pawb, good morning, everyone. It's really nice to be here and nice to follow presentations from both local authority level, but also at national government level. So thanks for having us here today. I thought I would just start with letting you know a little bit about Wales in the UK. We are a devolved government through Cnz Cymru, which is the equivalent of Welsh Parliament. We have 2 official languages, Welsh and English, so all of our resources are available bilingually in the 2 languages of Wales. We're quite small, with a small population of just over 3 million people. That was at the last census. We're due another one soon. And we have just over 700,000 children here in Wales. Again, that was at the last census. Those children are scattered across 22 local authorities, municipalities here in Wales. So as Robin's already mentioned, we are the national charity for children's play here in Wales, the NGO. We are a rights-based organisation and campaign for a Wales where children can realise their right to play. We're a small organisation. The size of the organisation reflects the size of Wales. There are 7 of us working currently, and we're working at the start of the coronavirus pandemic. And that means that we don't have a whole load of layers of bureaucracy that we need to work towards. So we were able to, we think, respond to some of the restrictions and the issues of working quite quickly. We've worked with International Play Association on a range of really exciting projects over the years. We hosted the 2011 conference. Some of you might have attended in Cardiff, a decade ago now. We worked with children to produce Article 31 resources to coincide with the launch of General Comment number 17. And we worked to develop the Access to Play in Crisis Toolkit, which helped to inform the resources which have already been mentioned in the last presentation. Coronavirus in Wales, what it looked like, what happened is we locked down in March 2020, schools closed, playwork provision closed, children's playgrounds closed, Play Wales office closed. We all went and worked at home. We thought it was going to be for 3 weeks, and we're nearly a year in now. And most play was in and around the home. So when we all packed up our office and went to our houses again across Wales, we decided that we wanted to be proactive from the outset. So we reviewed our work plan and tried to move work to prioritise activity which could offer a supportive response to uphold the right to play across settings and homes. So this include reviewing, updating and publishing some of our existing publications. That review meant that we identified new resources specific to the pandemic response. So we started writing and developing those. We identified and tried out new ways of working, using videos for tutorials, developing an online book club, networking opportunity for people here in Wales and further afar. We reprofiled the spring edition of our last spring's edition of our Play for Wales magazine to respond to the situation. And we identified some funding bodies to source grants to provide a range of resources for practitioners to distribute. So much like Linda mentioned, our municipalities and local authorities in Wales, similar to Ireland, and I'm sure lots of other places around the world, were developing resources and support for families, and we wanted to contribute to that, and we were able to. I'll talk a little bit more about that after. So Play Wales developed kind of our Corona Play initiative. For parents and families, we have a website called Playful Childhoods. And this is information designed to reach the general public, parents, caregivers, and communities to support children's play. So to support and inspire parents, and during the very early days of coronavirus, we created an indoor play section on our Playful Childhood website with a range of play ideas. It included fun, easy, playful ideas for parents to enjoy in and around the home, as well as some practical supportive tips. So included pages such as top tips, and that was top tips for den building at home, how to deal with messy play, for instance, ideas for playful parenting. We included some guest blog posts to support parents to understand some of the requirements around homeschooling, for instance, some of the benefits of boredom and how boredom can springboard into creativity. We published some guides, and we signposted to the International Play Association's resources for children, for parents and carers to support children's play. So just quickly, some of those, just some images of some of those resources, as I already mentioned, and all of these resources are bilingual and freely available on the various Play Wales and Playful Childhood's websites. We developed a Playful Childhood's Playing at Home guide for parents and carers. I've already mentioned the top tips, how to deal with messy play, rough and tumble play, teenager play, screen time tips, a range of how-to guides, a range of top tips. And this example in particular was looking at playing and well-being and how important playing was to support children through times of uncertainty and stress. We developed play ideas list. So the first one was 35 indoor play ideas. We then kind of challenged ourselves to come up with another 50 more. We had ideas for play around the home and games for playing at home as well. So the chief medical officers here in the UK had updated its guidance around physical activity for children, and we wanted to make sure that parents were as well versed as possible with those guidance. We made available a storybook for children's play, children's right to play. This storybook was written by children for children, excuse me, to promote the right to play. That is currently still available on the Play Wales website if you'd like to look at it. And we ambitiously published in the beginning of April our second storybook, again written with children to promote the right to play. That was called Fun in the Garden. We took delivery in a colleague's home and distributed via post and courier over 7,000 copies of that book. And at the moment, that book is also freely available on the Play Wales website if you'd like to have a look at it and share it with some of the people you work with or some of the families you work with. In terms of practitioners, we had a look, as I've already mentioned, we looked at a range of resources around outdoor play. So we developed some resources to support municipalities and other playground managers and providers to provide information and guidance for parks and open space officers when those spaces were going to be reopened. We developed some top tips for play working and coronavirus because there was a recognition that provision closed, but a lot of those settings were still supporting children either through the delivery of packs or keeping in touch somehow. We developed a range of resources for schools. Again, top tips on schools. In the very early days, our schools were opened as hubs, childcare hubs for vulnerable children and children of critical workers. And they really did take on a childcare function and role. So we wanted to make sure that those settings understood and provided for play as much as possible. We then also provided some guidance for schools on prioritizing play, when schools were reopening in the summer term, we wanted to promote in particular the positive mental health around play and how that could contribute to children recovering from the pandemic. We also provided some reading lists for teachers who were tasked with taking care of their own continuing professional development during when schools were closed. And a lot of our resources around play and well-being were refreshed and renewed and circulated. And in particular, our Play for Wales magazine focused on play and well-being in the current climate. Our continuing professional development program was refreshed, and we published and produced a series of bite-sized introductions around videos called Playwork Essential Videos, and it looks at various aspects of playwork. Those are freely available on our YouTube channel. It looks at risk-benefit assessment, the right to play, the use of loose parts, the playwork curriculum, for instance. I've already mentioned the Play Wales Book Club and the reading list for teachers, for instance. So just some of those resources for practitioners was updating and developing new information sheets to support play and to support an understanding of the importance of how practitioners could support playing actively in and around the home. I've already mentioned those focus on play documents, so looking specifically at the reopening of various levels of provision as lockdown restrictions were lifted in the summer. I should say Wales is back in lockdown, though with our youngest children returning to school, but with the messaging that there shouldn't be social mixing between households. So we're still kind of working in those situations of lockdown restrictions. We refocused our Play for Wales magazine. We published a reading list for teachers, top tips for play workers. That's a link to our Playwork Essentials videos, which are available off the Play Wales website. And the book club has been running since June and continues to run. We've managed to provide learning opportunities over that time period, looking at making accessible academic papers and journals to people working on the ground with children, so that they have the opportunity to digest some of the research around children's play, particularly in the current situation. So the numbers, what we achieved was we managed to gift 7,000 of those second story books to children and families with our partners across the local authorities in Wales. We gifted 7,000 of the Playing at Home guides, which were specifically to support and inspire parents and carers. For our first storybook, Fun in the Dungeon, we provided story sacks to every partner organization and every local authority to bring the storybook to life. And we know that many of them have been used for online storytelling sessions, which has been nice to watch. We assessed the impact in-house from March until June. So over that 3 months, we reached just under 400,000 people via our social media channels. Looking ahead, what we're really doing now, as I mentioned, we are still working in a lockdown situation. So we are really intent on learning some lessons from the coronavirus, but also the restrictions and the impact that that's had on children. We really want to capitalize on the positives. Here in Wales, the streets were quieter. Children reported enjoying having time to walk and cycle and play on their bikes and scoot and chalk on their pavements in a safer environment. Neighbours were more present, certainly in Wales. I'm sure it's similar across many other parts of the world. Neighbours were looking after one another. They were outside a little bit more, and we want to capitalise on that community connection. There were playful interventions in communities. So for instance, there was more chalking on the streets, there were painted pebbles. Somebody mentioned fairy doors, one of the previous presenters mentioned fairy doors in woods, and the importance of playing was recognized. I think generally people understood that playing is going to be a real driver in supporting children to recover from the uncertainty and the ongoing stress that pandemic, and probably more specifically for children, the restrictions, the social restrictions that the pandemic response led to. And here in Wales, the role of play work and play workers was valued. Our play workers were called upon to support schools, both when they opened as childcare hubs to help to understand play, and many play workers are now involved in the school day to support the school staff to better understand children's play. So I think that those are things that we want to capitalize. On the other side, though, the pandemic has really highlighted some of the inequalities around children's play and access. So the previous presenters have already mentioned about the resources and the need to focus on playing in and around the home. The research with children has shown that not all children have access to a good outdoor space. That might be just a private garden, or it may just be space that feels safe nearby. So one of the things that Play Wales is working on at the moment is projects that will better use outdoor community spaces for the benefit of more children, specifically to address those inequalities that the pandemic has highlighted for us. So I've run through a range of our resources, and they are available on the Play Wales website. So we've got a specific section called Corona Play, which will take you to all of the resources for practitioners. They also sit on the publications page of the website, but the Corona Play is kind of your one-stop station, if you like, for all of the resources for practitioners, and also for the resources for parents and communities. There is also a link on the Play Wales website, which takes you to the Playful Childhoods website. And as I said, those are easily accessible, nicely written, I think, pieces aimed at parents and the general public. And on both of those websites, there is the opportunity to sign up to receive information and mailings from Play Wales if you're interested in some of our work. So diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand over to Robin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And what a wonderful range of free resources that we can all access. Thank you for sharing so freely those resources over many years too. And so I think it's a real credit to Play Wales that you have been so free with the resources. And I know that across the world, many people are still, using them and accessing them. So that is 3 of our presentations. So we're making good time this evening. And now I'm going to hand over to IPA Portugal, and Frederico is joining us tonight because just even at a branch level, we have had organisations making a difference. And IPA Portugal wasn't part of the award series, but I thought it would be interesting to finish off with us hearing from a branch what they've actually been doing during this time of COVID to actually make a difference, and some of their ideas, and also share with them some upcoming events that IPA Portugal is going to be doing. So can I hand over to you, Frederico? If I can find him. Now, Frederico has recently become a father. So
hello, everyone. Yes, hello. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I would like also to express my congratulations to all of the presentations. It's really remarkable the work that everyone sort of across the world has been doing across this period. So we really sort of, it's very inspiring for us here in Portugal too. And as you said in the beginning, Robin, we do feel that we're part of a larger community. And that is a very, very nice feeling, because in times like these, it's very easy to feel sort of silent and to feel alone, especially when it comes to play advocacy and play provision, because as we know, and Portugal was not an exception, that is an issue that still needs a lot of work, and that's what IPA Portugal has been trying to actually do across, well, since the beginning of last year, when the lockdown was installed here in Portugal. And so we've been actually trying to basically to accompany some of the movements and some of the actions that other NGOs and have been undertaking to actually reinforce the government's attention, not only the central government, but also the local authorities, for the urgency to create a new agenda to recover children's well-being through play. That has been our sort of strong sort of emphasis and focus. So I should say that, so when the lockdown was when it happened in March, then 1 month after, in April, IPA Portugal then produced this statement on the value of promoting free play in times of isolation and social distance. So this statement was actually then spread across through social media, and then we tried to establish contacts with some important newspapers and news channels, but unfortunately we were not very successful at the time. Nevertheless, we did have this sort of message and this statement spread out. And basically in this statement, sort of similar to other statements that were being produced elsewhere, there was this sort of idea behind that in a time where children were going to be restricted in their homes, free play and self-directed play should be the motto. So the statement sort of basically covered a lot of what it was, the loose parts play, and also the need to actually take children out within what was actually allowed for those brief moments of walking, and sort of calling it to the attention that the most important physical activity for children would actually fall on play. So basically, this was like the first sort of movement that IPA Portugal sort of did. So then after a few months, this consortium called Brinca a Pé, which is translated would be something like play foot. So that's sort of a bad translation, but it's the best which I can come up now. This consortium, which is basically formed by these two organizations, one which is the Child Safety organization that we have here, association, and then another association, which I'm also part of, which is basically a project which aims to provide play and to actually do play advocacy using a playwork sort of framework, so called 1, 2, 3 Macaquinho do Chinês. So this consortium called Brinca a Pé had been sort of working with schools and communities before the lockdown. So, and was doing sort of very sort of interesting work, providing sessions of loose parts play at schools, but also was actually listening to children's own perspectives of their local communities in terms of play opportunities, and actually what children felt and thought about their sort of local neighborhoods. So some materials were produced across this time, including maps based on children's perspectives about how public space was actually perceived by them in terms of play. Then we had the play work sessions that were conducted in school, and so this joint sort of effort because this project sort of was embedded within this within this municipality bigger sort of projects, which actually give the opportunity for NGOs to actually to produce social innovation sort of efforts within deprived communities. So we were actually working on a very practical basis. But then because of the lockdown, you know, everyone had to stay home. So the work sort of basically came to a halt. So we had to basically adapt, as we've seen in other presentations here today. And so this, and also sort of motivated by this previous letter that IPA Portugal had produced, sort of led us to actually think that it would be important to actually come up with an open letter on the right to play in pandemic times. So this open letter, then the idea would be to actually to come up with a very sort of simple letter that could be easily sort of readable by researchers, to psychologists, to educators, but also to the common sort of citizen. And so the idea was to actually to call to the attention that the right to play was not being actually heard in this pandemic sort of time. And so the message was actually quite clear. So before we actually produced this letter, we had the opportunity to actually talk with Tim Gill about it. And he sort of said in the conversation that we had, he said something which sort of kept on my mind, which was something. So the message is important, but what is more important in a letter like this would be sort of those who are going to actually to subscribe the letter. So in this sense, we produced this open letter, and the open letter was very sort of it was a sort of a practical call and a sort of a call out for governments, for municipalities, and for people from NGOs and for local citizens to actually realize that children were being deprived of something which was, you know, is fundamentally important for their well-being and development. So it was actually based very much on general comment number 17 that sort of inspired us to actually to produce the letter. And so then when we had the content of the letter, sort of when we came up with the contact, then the idea was we needed to find a bunch of important subscribers, people that were well known by their play advocacy sort of agenda, or because they were important researchers or psychologists or teachers, or, you know, people that were known from the sort of from the public, and that could somehow actually help us sort of say that this was an important message that we wanted to actually to broadcast. So we did the contact, this contact with these sort of individual sort of personalities, if you want to put it like that. But also then we thought it was important to establish contact with the Child Support Institute, with the UNICEF Portugal, with the Portuguese Association of the Pediatricians, with the Association of Municipalities. So we kind of came up with these sort of important people and organization that could sort of say, okay, this is something really serious and that people should actually look at with, you know, with their eyes sort of more open in this sense. So then sort of the holidays came and the lockdown sort of continued. And then in September 2020, so and once we had this group of important subscribers already sort of who said, okay, we will sign this letter, then we contact this well-known journalist, and she's also known for the work that she's been done across the years to promote children's right, including the right to play. And so we sort of sent her an email and telling her about the letter, and we were very fortunate because then she wrote a piece in this well-known newspaper in Portugal, one of the most important ones, which she actually sort of, she built this story and using this open letter as a base. And this kind of sort of helped sort of spread the actual content of it. So by then she also did a little radio show where she also sort of presented the open letter, and then we had a very important ambassador in all this, which is which most of you probably know, which is Professor Carlos Neto, and he is always on the news, and he's the most sort of our most recognizable play advocate. And so he also had the opportunity to kind of share this the content of this open letter and what was actually sort of written in it across the many interviews that he has been providing in these last months. So basically, by September, we had a very interesting number of subscribers, and Portugal is a small country, so we had more or less over more than 100 people. And we had people from different sectors. So we had people from the play sector, from the education sector, from the people sort of more psychotherapists, psychologists. We had organizations, NGOs, UNICEF Portugal. So basically, although it took some time to actually reach this, we were able to find this really sort of important sort of subscribers, and to actually show to people that this was a very sort of important matter that should be then discussed at a government sort of level. Because what we recognize here in Portugal is that when the lockdown measures are sort of being taken and are being decided, we have this idea and the impression that authorities that relate to children's rights, and especially to the right to play, are not being correctly heard on this. So they hear a lot of clinical people, epidemiological people, doctors, but not people related with the play sector. So this was also our goal. We wanted to use the letter to actually instill this discussion within Parliament about what was happening to children's right to play, including, for instance, we are allowed, because we are also still in lockdown, we are allowed and families are allowed to go for brief periods of walking and physical activity, and it's never the word play is never used. So this was also a simple goal that we had, and we sort of, with this letter, we thought, so then now the next level is that, because it's being shared in social media, we have all these people talking about the content. So now the next step would be to actually contact the members of Parliament, the different members of Parliament, which are represented by the different parties, and to actually ask if they would be able to have hearings with us about the content of the letter. And so from September onwards, we sort of we started addressing the members of Parliament, and so far until now we've had 4 hearings with 4 different parties, and they all sort of recognize the importance of what we are sort of aiming and what the content of the letter. And what we sort of, the main conclusions of this hearing is that it may, and I think one of the most important one, is that there may be the possibility of creating this commission of experts and personalities which are not from the government, so would be people from research, educator, but also play advocates, and so to form a sort of a panel and a working group that could then be part of this larger commission that they already have, which is on children's rights. And so the idea would be, and to actually have the opportunity then to have an external panel, an external group focused on children's right to play, and on the establishment of a recovery plan for children's play, right, within this parliamentary group. But the main focus would be that, and this group has to be sort of representative of people from the play sector and from different areas, from play providers to the play advocates. So this is now our goal, and by the hearings that we've been having, it seems sort of we think that there is a chance for this to happen, but we also know that this is going to take, you know, a long time to happen. So we've also realized that the actions that are being undertaken have to be sort of multi-level, and they have to be multi-contextual. So that this is why we are trying to actually work with municipalities, and obviously IPA Portugal is based here in Lisbon, but we are working with municipalities also through the Faculty of Human Kinetics, where I also work as a researcher and as a teacher. But but we are trying to kind of build this matter of sort of knowledge and actually of practice and experiences, in order to actually to convince local governments, municipalities, NGOs to kind of create a common sort of framework regarding children's play and the recovery that is necessary after, you know, this extensive period of lockdown. So because the government is very much sort of worried with a recuperation plan for the learning, but we don't hear the government talking about for, you know, a plan to recuperate play. So that is our sort of focus at the moment. And when we go back to the open letter, we have sort of very simple sort of messages, things, for instance, as simple as, and I will sort of translate briefly some of the measures that we've asked for some of these sectors to actually undertake. So for local parishes and municipalities to increase the areas of play within their territories, sort of doing play streets as we did in September, also in neighborhoods, opening the reopening of playgrounds, for instance, for the General Health Secretariat, and for people from the pediatrician, clinical, and the Portuguese Society of Pediatrician, and psychologists, and Health Public National Council, etc., to actually do a joint declaration on the value of outdoor play, where the actual risks of being of having COVID are actually sort of linked with this analysis of the benefits in terms of mental health and physical health and well-being that play may bring. So a sort of risk-benefit analysis of the risk of actually, you know, getting COVID, but compared with the risk of not being able to have opportunities for free play, for educators, for the Ministry of Education and school coordinators, teachers, and schools, to basically recognize that when schools reopen, at the time to play, it's very important, and it's also a therapeutic time. For doctors, pediatricians, nurses, psychologists, and other health professionals to actually prescribe to families and to children time for free play and contact with the outdoors, and for communities and carers to actually come to this commitment when it comes to protecting, providing, and preserving the right to play. So basically, the message is quite simple. But we are now at a moment where this is also work that IPA Portugal has been done. We have a map of what we call the play map in Portugal. And so we have a very good sort of idea of the different play organizations and NGOs who actually work with families and children in terms of play provision, play and leisure provision. So I guess this common framework that I was talking about and will also be something that in the future and across this year we want to actually come up with this session where we will actually have all these different organizations which have been mapped across the country, and to start sort of talking with these organizations to sort of about the right to play and how could we sort of create this common framework on children's right to play, so that each of these organizations can actually locally tackle this problem and find solutions which are sort of if you want local sensitive. So it's still, we are still on the very much beginning of this, but so far I'm actually sort of quite happy to kind of say that this effort that started on April 2020 and that's going to carry on throughout this year, so far has produced, I think, sort of has created the grounds for us to actually to move forward and to, you know, carry on with our work here. And so this is more or less what I wanted to share with you.
Yeah. Frederica, I must say, and that's one of the reasons we had you sort of finish our session of seminars, because you, what IPA Portugal has done in, you know, only recently forming, and this has been a wonderful time of achievement for you. You personify the beauty and the wonder of why, you know, of associations, and part of the International Play Association's strength of actually bringing people together in the way you have. So thank you for sharing that. You know, you've come a long way, Frederico, with IPA Portugal, and so I think it's a wonderful way and fitting tribute to say this is an example of the strength of the International Play Association. Our branches are doing really wonderful things at local levels, and that's where it has to happen, that mobilisation.